Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Channel Your Success, The Future is Here, and it's not traditional TV. My name is Alex Pontikis, and I'm part of the marketing team here at StackAdapt. Now let's get started, and I'll hand it over to our presenter, Nico and Yasmin. Off to you.
Hello, everyone, and yes, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Yasmin Tamir. I'm one of the senior sales managers here at StackAdapt, focusing on the UK market. And then, yes, we have our my colleague as well, Nico, on the call. He's one of our senior managers in the inventory team. So really working closely with us and with all of the wonderful CTV publishers out there to sort of together bring you the best offering within the CTV space. Just a little bit about StackAdapt before we dive into today's content. For those of you who maybe are less familiar with us and our proposition, we are a multi-channel DSP focusing really on all of those more traditional programmatic channels, you know, like your displays, native video, that bread and butter of the industry, but also really leading the way on more of those broadcast channels available programmatically. So, of course, CTV, which we'll be diving into today, audio, digital out of home, in-game. So yeah, we're really able to access all of those inventory sources and then kind of adding in our own technology and our own insight and data to really be able to, within those channels, find the most relevant audiences for you. We are the leading number one DSP in the industry. So yeah, I think for any of you guys who are on the call who already work with us, you probably kind of already experienced why. But yeah, for maybe those of you who are slightly newer to StackAdapt, hopefully today just gives you a bit of that insight to some of the things that make us that leading DSP. And as you can imagine from the title, the focus of today is really going to be on diving a little bit deeper on CTV, and particularly within that European market. Obviously, it's still kind of an evolving channel here in Europe, so we're going to be navigating the CTV landscape. We're then going to dive a little bit deeper into some of the strategy recommendations for running a successful CTV campaign. And also just diving into some more specific advanced strategies that you can run, and then kind of wrapping up on how you can optimize within this channel, how you can understand performance and kind of feed that back into your optimizations. And yeah, as Alex mentioned at the start, we'll then end up on some questions. So yeah, if there's anything that you'd like to find out more about, today's a good opportunity to ask those questions. So I will hand it over to Nico to give you an introduction to the landscape of CTV.
Hi everyone. So yeah, I'm going to be taking you through the landscape and what is so interesting about CTV and why we're doing this webinar. Now, you're going to quickly see a trend of what we will be saying today about the meteoric rise of CTV and just how quickly it's growing. So our data shows that versus the same period last year, 50% more marketers on our platform have been including CTV as a channel. But then you might ask, why is it so irresistible to marketers? And that depends on who you ask, really. Different people say different things. Some will say it's the fact that you can deliver highly targeted, data-driven campaigns. Others will talk about the seamless integration of ad experiences into the viewing journey. But whatever the reasons, it's just very, very clear that CTV is here to stay, and the impact it's having on advertising is absolutely enormous. Now, there's loads and loads of data to back this up, so I might speed through it a little bit. Do bear with me, but this is just a small sample of some of the data points. So in the UK, according to eMarketer, CTV spend has now surpassed laptop and desktop share of spending. 90% of CTV is now traded programmatically, and over 2/3 of the UK population is using a CTV, whether they realise it or not. 80% of marketers are including streaming channels in their plans now, which is huge, huge amount. CTV growth is actually set to outpace mobile by some distance as well. Overall, the programmatic display advertising market is set to grow by about 12.6% in 2024. The mobile section of that is pretty much on average at 12.7%, but CTV is set to outpace it by 8 percentage points at a huge 20.7%. One last bit of data that I'll say before I go on to the next point is that according to a recent Double Verify study, over half of UK respondents and 49% of mainland Europe respondents said that they've subscribed to an additional streaming service in the last year. And in that study, 59% of them said that they're open to ad-supported videos on their streaming services. So there are so many benefits to CTV. I'm going to take you through now just a portion of them, but hopefully it covers it off quite well and gives you an idea of why everyone's including it in their plans. So with CTV, there is a lower financial investment compared to linear TV. There aren't the long-term commitments or the minimum or the as high minimums in the first place. And the ads actually work out more cost-effective because of things like the improved viewability, the fact that you know people are watching the content. In linear, if you're buying a slot on a program, you don't know whether people are actually watching that channel or if the TV is even on. But with CTV, you know that it's only where people are watching and when they're watching. The precise targeting also really allows you to hone in on the right target audience, whether that's certain demographics or using data segments to tailor the campaigns. It just allows you to avoid a lot of media waste and really make sure your money counts. You can reach incremental audiences and engage viewers that have moved away from traditional cable. We call them cord cutters. So it allows you to get additional viewers that you couldn't get through just a linear TV campaign. And you're still targeting them in premium, high quality, brand safe environments, including things like sport, which live sport is a big advancement in this space. And also, since the CTV ads are executed programmatically, unlike linear TV, they're all measured and optimized in real time. So you can make changes on the fly and really ensure that your campaigns are performing. You can then use cross-channel retargeting and hit them in different channels like display and video online after the campaign to really make sure your budget is going as far as possible. And then also, very big buzzword right now, but it is cookieless. It's future-proofing your advertising strategy with the upcoming removal of the cookie. But I'm going to be honest with you, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There are some challenges and considerations to bear in mind, and I'll walk you through them a little bit here. So there are splintered audiences. This is from the consumer behavior shifts. There are splintered audiences. People are multitasking while they're watching CTV. There's also co-viewing, which is when there's more than one person on the sofa watching, which is great for the marketer and the buyer because their impressions go that bit further. They might be buying one impression, but hitting 2 or 3 people. But it does also complicate the measurement a little bit because you don't know how many people are in the room at all times. And that's not a challenge that other channels deal with in the same way. And then the other main source of chaos is around the ad purchase paths. These can be a bit confusing for marketers to understand. You can buy the same programs and channels from various sources, such as streaming services or the device manufacturers like LG and Samsung, or different programmatic platforms. And these can come from all over the place. But due to different contracts and licensing agreements, it might mean that there are different levels of transparency in the exact program that you're buying, different levels of selectivity, just depending on the path that it takes. It's also worth talking about measurement. And when CTV ads were first introduced, it was a bit slow to be adopted because there weren't the same standards in place that were in linear TV advertising. Marketers were worried about campaign measurement, but the IAB is doing a really good job at the moment of standardizing the measurement in the CTV space. And then audience oversaturation can happen if you're not buying in the right ways. So serving ads across lots of different platforms without that centralized view will mean that you might end up with the same viewers being bombarded with repetitive ads. That can lead to, less effectiveness and even potential backlash if you're really, really serving too many ads on that same user. So coordinating ad delivery and deduplicating audiences across the ecosystem is crucial. And then how can we do that? And we can do that simply by using a DSP, like StackAdapt, of course. We would allow you to consolidate your buys and do things like focus on the audiences rather than the networks. leverage that omnichannel attribution across all different mediums that you can buy ads across, and it will really help you navigate the fragmented TV landscape more effectively. Now I'm going to hand back over to Yasmin to take you through how to set up a campaign.
Awesome. So yes, how do you actually go about securing that inventory or trading that inventory? So of course, with any type of programmatic way, there's quite a few options that you can take, and it's really going to depend on seasonality, your vertical, your target audience, and of course, this is something that you can really work with your StackAdapt representatives to make sure that you get the right level of these kind of sources of inventory. So probably one of the most popular ways in which we trade programmatic at the moment is through private marketplace deals, so also known as PMPs. So this is really about having that direct deal with the publishers and kind of broadcasters within the CTV space, to pick some of those channels that might be reflected in kind of the viewership of your audience. And you really get to have a first look and decide which ones are going to be the most suitable for your advertiser and for your target audience. Then you get into programmatic guaranteed. So this is a slightly more, let's say, premium tactic or more specific tactic. So this is really about removing that competition at times when you really want to make sure that you absolutely can secure specific inventory. So, for example, Nico mentioned sporting events at the start. So this is a time where there's going to be increased competition. You want to make sure that you're absolutely going to be securing that spot. And also around other key consumer periods. So, you might be thinking Black Friday, times like that, again, depending on your brand and kind of your objectives. These are times when we might want to implement some programmatic guaranteed with specific publishers or kind of timings in the social calendar, so to speak, to really make sure that we are securing specific inventory. And then probably the bread and butter as well is more of that data-driven optimization and kind of trading model. So this is really about focusing on where that audience is going to be, where are those best performing inventory sources and things like that, to really make sure that we are we're there and that we're capturing that qualified reach of the right households to show the messaging to. And as Nico mentioned at the start, CTV is, it's very much a reach building channel. It's a broadcast channel. It's a one-to-many channel. So it's about getting your message out to as many people as possible. And of course, it's really there to drive that incremental reach. So that could mean incrementality on top of your linear TV. So if you already have that strategy in place, how can we find that potentially younger demographic, people who are maybe ahead of the curve a little bit, they're watching those CTV channels, but also incremental reach on top of maybe more of a standard programmatic buy. So let's say you're doing more low to middle funnel strategies, you're doing really well at converting users, but how can you drive more demand? How can you show and tell your story and communicate brand awareness type of messaging to many as well? So again, this is where CTV is going to be really good at bringing that incremental reach and diversifying your channel mix so that you're really bringing in new users, and you're able to have that conversation with many new prospects as well. And when it comes to what we think makes a great CTV ad, because we have that, we have access to a bigger screen, to more space, more attention as well with the user. A lot of these are probably similar recommendations to, what a broadcaster might tell you to run on linear TV. But it's kind of going to combine some of those best practices with something like a video or more typically programmatic channels. So, Again, because you've got that bigger screen, sound on experience, more attentive audience, this is really your time to leverage storytelling. So, you can start to think about maybe more of an emotive message. Again, it really depends on your specific product and your clientele, but you can start to think about building more of that brand love, brand awareness, and kind of have that more of a connection with the audience. But also you can, because it is more of a programmatic channel, and you can have different creatives for different types of households, different target audiences. This is really your time to start to think about different variations for different audiences. So it can be maybe as simple as, based on different interests, we can show different creative. Based on different types of shows that we're targeting and kind of genres, we can show different creative. So again, really maximizing the ad experience there, and relevance as well. And also just integrating your brand and kind of having more of that call to action as well. So, we'll talk about later about how we can capture that user from early on in brand awareness stages, all the way down to continuing that conversation with them through more mid to lower funnel channels as well. But obviously, if we're thinking about CTV, we want to start really strong on that branding element and brand story as well. So this is a really good way to tell your brand story and also have a strong call to action, and then be able to retarget the user further down their journey as we'll get into slightly later when it comes to more strategies as well on CTV. And when it comes to the targeting, certainly in the UK, when it comes to more linear TV, the targeting is extremely broad. So it'll be ABC One men, ABC One women, mums, C2D audience. It's extremely broad. Whereas obviously CTV is bringing the beauty of that large screen and storytelling format, but with added capabilities of being able to target the right audience with reduced wastage. So we can target based on the device types. We can, of course, think about time of day and day of week. So when is our audience most likely to be attentive and watching that TV screen? But then, of course, we can start to think about, more interest targeting. So, thinking about specific interests that your target audience might have, adding in first and third party targeting and thinking about how we can scale based on that. Really be able to not just drive any old reach, just, the way that linear TV would have worked in the past and still does to this day with very little change. But also actually be able to drive very much qualified reach as well. And then be able to retarget users based on who viewed your CTV ad as well, which again, we'll get into in a little bit more detail, but that's really the beauty of it, is that we're not just driving this broadcast messaging and then forgetting about it. We're able to recapture that user and continue a conversation with them. And a little bit of a case study of how that's actually driven value for just one of our many clients. As Nico said, we've seen a massive uptake in CTV, and that's really been down to some of the performance. As you can imagine, due to the nature of the channel, view through rate is extremely high. But one thing that we've been able to see, and it's a bit of a thread that we're noticing across many of the clients who are using CTV and to be honest, also other upper funnel channels, even such as display, is that when our clients use those upper funnel channels to drive that awareness, drive that consideration and kind of brand love, at the higher, very much at the top of the funnel, what we've been able to see further down, when it comes to their display targeting or it comes to their conversion rates, all in all, is that they've been able to drive massive cost efficiencies there. So in this example here, the display CPA amongst users who viewed the CTV ad first was decreased by 40%. So That's really showing an undeniable power of building that brand and kind of investing in upper funnel as well, to then bring efficiencies further down the journey as well. And then one of the ways in which we can measure the success of CTV as well is brand surveys and brand lift studies and things like that. And this is another one where we had around 3,000 responses as well. So not only were we able to drive more cost-efficient conversions as well, but we were able to also get an understanding from the viewers on what they thought of the brand, and kind of how their views were impacted as a result of seeing the ads. So I'm going to hand it back over to Nico now to just go through a little bit more detail as well on those tactics and how they can be implemented.
Yep. So there are a few things you can do to really make sure that you set up the best possible campaign. First of all, make sure that you are breaking out those, if you are running as Yaz said, the PMPs and the PGs, make sure you're separating them all into different lines, run of network versus PMP versus PG. It will allow you to optimize much better and bid at the right prices. You don't want to be paying PG prices for run of network deals. So that can really, you need to be able to separate them, so you're optimizing your bids. Next is being mindful that you're setting the right demographics. A very common example for this in CTV is male versus female. If you're targeting, you've got to remember that you're targeting an entire household. So if there's both men and women in that household, or a man and a woman, and you're only targeting women, you may end up accidentally excluding loads of households that have both men and women in it. So it's not that you can't do it, it's just it can reduce scale if you're not thinking about that side of it. So be very conscious of that. Similarly, don't narrow down the geo too much to only a few postcodes. The way postcode targeting works with CTV isn't quite perfect, so best practice is to set that at city level or even regional level. CTV and TV in general is a medium best used quite widespread. Now, if you want to get smart with it, you can also set up percentile tracking. There are a few partners that don't allow this that we work with, but the vast majority will allow you to do percentile tracking. What that means is you can retarget users who have watched 50% of the video or 100% of the video at different levels with assets on display, native, or video. I also want to touch on the left side of the screen here a little bit, because some other points are that you shouldn't be afraid of testing out different creatives. All channels this goes for, but CTV in particular, make sure you've got like a 15-second and a 30-second version with maybe different products in them, different narrators or audio tracking and stuff in the background. A/B test and really just work out what's resonating best with your audience and where you're seeing the performance. And then Yaz has slightly touched on this already, but make sure you know, especially when you're building the video, what your goal is and how you're building the video, why you're building the video in that way. CTV is generally best for high-level awareness campaigns. It can very much help you pull people down the funnel, but make sure that your creative is built with that in mind, that it is an awareness piece, or if it's not, make sure it's built with that in mind as well. I'm going to touch on the retargeting side a bit, because if you're going to be doing other activity alongside CTV, this is definitely something worth setting up, or at least considering setting up. So how this works at a very top line level is by using the same residential IPs, we're able to sequentially retarget users across different channels. You can hit them with that emotional movie-like big screen experience on their TV. And then later on, maybe while they're in bed on their phone, you can retarget them on that device to remind them of the brand and what they've seen. And this can be really, really powerful. And if you want a bit more information, make sure to reach out to your StackAdapt rep on that. Next is to use forecast to plan your campaign effectively in advance. Yaz has touched on a lot of this already, but just really make sure you're going after the right audience, the right customer profile. Is it definitely the right area of the country that you're targeting? Is it the right user? How are they interacting with different channels and that incrementality side? Will adding display and native both be worth, or do you just need to add display? Is it a very wide awareness piece and you're better off just doing digital out of home and audio alongside it? So make sure you know what the right channel mix is for you in advance. And planners like ours, along with the assistance from our team, will allow you to really work out how to hit that right audience. And in the planners as well, you can see things like unique reach, whether your budget is going to actually spend in full. If it's saying it's not going to spend in full, why isn't it going to spend in full? Is it because of the audience you've overlaid, or the geos are too strict, or is your bid price too low? It's definitely something to make sure you're planning well in advance of the campaign. And now, Yas will tell you a bit about the performance and measurement side of it all.
Oh, so yeah, this is really what it kind of ultimately all comes down to, right? So yes, we want to drive this awesome reach, but how do we actually measure the impact and kind of see that through as well? So in terms of the key metrics to measure, and these are just some of the more in-platform typical metrics that we can look at to really evaluate the success of a CTV campaign. As you can imagine, in line with the nature of CTV as a channel, it is a broadcast channel. So with that, the key metrics that we look at measuring and optimizing towards are going to be things like impressions, reach incrementality as well, completed views, and kind of being able to back that to a cost per completed view. But then some of the more I think really exciting metrics and metrics that really justify the whole point of running something like this through a multi-channel DSP such as StackAdapt is then the view through conversion. So again, this is not something that was possible or still is possible on classic linear TV. So really being able to understand out of those users who were exposed to the ad, not only how many came back through and maybe purchased on your website, but we can even measure things like did they just come back to your website, for example? So even page views, we can see that a user was exposed to CTV ad and then came back to the website. So we can really start to understand and map out that user journey, which is really cool. That's like with a really exciting data comes through after on. And of course, also understanding, which devices drove the best reach, cost effectiveness, completed views, and things like that. So yeah, there are a few metrics in terms of typical platform ways in which you can measure success. But similar to what I mentioned as well in that case study earlier on, a big way to be able to measure the success of CTV is seeing the knock-on impact on your more typical channels. So let's say display. We also get a lot of clients feeding back their really low funnel channels, such as, for example, PPC. They see a positive impact in terms of search traffic and conversion rates. So again, this is where we collaborate with you as an agency to kind of be able to see, even outside of those channels that don't run on StackAdapt, what was the impact holistically of this campaign. And similarly, on that thread, obviously those are the data points that we can understand in terms of what can we report on, and obviously that's what we would then use to optimize or to make sure that you're delivering in full. So if you're ever, for example, underpacing, some of the things that we can look at are obviously adjusting your bids. So as I mentioned at the start, we can be more competitive depending on time of year, seasonality, specific inventory types as well might be more competitive than others. So, we would work with you depending on all of those factors to make sure that your bids are kind of in line with that, but also trying to get you the most cost-efficient results. Geo as well, and I can see that there was a question there about targeting capabilities. Yes, we can target, by postcode and things like that. But again, can we think more of I always say, like, respect the channel. Again, this is a broadcast channel. So, you want to plan and trade in line with that. So really thinking about how can we maybe expand instead of just the postcode to potentially that whole city or that whole region, for instance, to really make sure that we're driving the correct type of reach. And then we can follow up from there into maybe thinking about other channels as well, and driving that more specific geo reach as well. In line with that, expanding our inventory. Nico and his team are constantly doing so much work to bring on more and more exciting inventory opportunities. So again, how can you leverage that and make sure that you're giving yourself as many opportunities as possible to find your audience, which leads me nicely to expanding that audience. So this is really going to depend on your the exact targeting that you want to go after, and also your budgets. But yeah, how can we think about getting that right balance between, we want to have qualified reach, we want to target the right users who are going to be relevant to that advertiser, but also thinking again about, this is a broadcast channel, how can I start broad and then funnel down later on? So again, we'd work with you really depending on your objectives, your goal, your budget, to make sure that we're getting the right balance in. And also, as Nico said at the start, making sure we have the right assets in place, which is actually something that we can help you with. So for instance, if you only have a 30-second asset, but maybe you're finding that you're not delivering enough, we can even help you to cut it down to 15 seconds. So you're giving yourself as many opportunities to be in front of the relevant audience. And the really exciting I keep saying that, but for me, the most important thing is being able to really be able to measure and understand the impact of that CTV ad. So, great, we start off with that ad exposure on CTV. We're getting that messaging across. But then how can we think about continuing that conversation with the user? So the really powerful part there is then being able to retarget. So we can say, okay, if a user saw that ad in full, I then want to retarget them with maybe slightly more of a mid-funnel messaging on, let's say, video. And then I can say, well, if they watched it in full, then I want to show them a display ad to really start to push them further down the channel. And you can even start to do really cool things like, if they then saw the video ad, if they watched that in full versus if they didn't, we show them a slightly different display messaging, again, to really give ourselves the best possible opportunities to deliver on the goals that you've briefed us out on. And then, as I mentioned earlier on, that measurement and attribution is where we can start to understand, what ads and on what channels the user was exposed to, and then what impact did that have. So did they visit the site or not? Did they convert on site? Did they have positive brand lift? Did they, based on any footfall attribution that you might want to put in place? Again, that's something that you can work with us on. Did they then come back and visit my physical store or my showroom or whatever that might be? So it's kind of being able to understand that, report on that, and then be able to feed that back into the next round of planning for not just your CTV campaign, but your overall media mix as well, programmatically. And then, obviously that's kind of the more programmatic things that we can measure. But if your client is also running linear TV, we can put things in place to understand the crossover there, but also probably most importantly is being able to understand that incrementality. So obviously this is really going to depend on the regions that you run in and the targeting that you go after. Typically, like a younger demographic, for example, you might see a smaller overlap with linear and then really high incrementality. And that's obviously where you'd want to really push for something like a CTV. And then for other verticals, we might see that maybe this isn't a case of driving that incremental reach, but actually this is an opportunity for us to build frequency more cost effectively than linear TV. So maybe we know that there's an overlap, but we want to use that as an opportunity, to keep speaking to maybe similar households and kind of keep driving that brand awareness messaging. So that is something that we can that we've been able to start reporting on, and again, kind of use that as an optimization tactic as well. And another thing that we can measure, and that I sort of touched on earlier as well, is brand lift. So again, because this is an opportunity to communicate your brand messaging, your brand proposition, it's also really great to see, did the user actually kind of comprehend that message? Did it change their perception of your brand? And I can see that's something that somebody asked as well, is how do you conduct the brand lift study? So what we would do is we can see that a user has been exposed to a CTV ad. And what we then do through desktop, tablet, and mobile is we would retarget them and expose them with a brand lift study message. So the really cool thing about this is that you can ask any question that you want. So we would work with you to ensure that it's worded in a way that's going to get the best possible response rates. But you can ask anything from would you consider this brand? What brands would you consider? So you can start to understand, did my CTV ad have an impact? Did I take away consideration from my competitors, for example? Or you can have it a bit more open-ended and kind of start to understand just like perceptions of your brand. So there's plenty of things we can ask, and then we also have templates on, consideration, awareness that you kind of follow as well. And for me, the really cool thing about our brand lift studies versus something like a more typical, like a YouTube brand lift study, for instance, is that you actually get those results back in real time during the flight. So with a lot of those other platforms, you might have to wait like 6 weeks post-campaign, for example, whereas you're actually able to get those results in real time and start to actually understand how not just your CTV, but maybe even all of your other channels are impacting those perceptions, so that you can actually start to understand and act on that in real time. And again, drive that effectiveness of your media spend as well, not just once the campaign has ended and you've probably already planned your next burst, but actually as the flight is still running. So yes, that's kind of the end of the intro today to the future of CTV. We'll hand it over to some questions. I think there's been a couple come through already.
Yep, I'll just quickly summarize that all very top line for you all. Like, as I'm sure you can all see, CTV is a huge opportunity that we're all really excited about. There's lots of amazing things you can do in this channel, and it's great to see it growing at the rate it is. Marketers are all going to be considering it very soon. As I said, we're already at 80% of people doing that. But the key things to remember is when you're running it, make sure that you're really optimizing and checking your performance regularly. It's a huge, huge advantage of the channel. And the fact that you can just change things on the fly is massive benefit that you're being silly if you're not if you're not making the most of it. So really keep an eye on that. If you can change price, move budget, add or remove different levels of targeting, that's really how you should be optimizing a CTV campaign. You need to be making the most out of the power of DSPs and using things like all our optimization tools, the retargeting tools, and implementing these advanced tactics that we've spoken about. Work very closely with us on this, and we will really make sure that you see brilliant results. And then the other thing is making sure that you are expanding your reach beyond CTV. As Yaz spoke about quite a bit, you definitely should be using all other channels while you're using CTV. It's absolutely amazing, but it should be part of your channel mix, not the whole thing. So yeah, make sure you're really doing a good range of channels in your mix.
Thank you. Thank you, Nico and Yasmin. That's been really, really insightful. We'll now move on to the Q&A session. So please continue to submit your questions through the webinar panel. We've already received some questions, so we'll get started with those. Do not worry. Like I said, if we don't get to yours during the webinar, we'll follow up directly after the webinar. So first question, we've talked a little bit about the landscape, the CTV landscape. What is the difference between OTT and CTV?
Yep, I can take that. So it's a great question and something that we often get asked when we're planning campaigns. So CTV kind of encompasses the whole of the market, but OTT is more specifically when we're talking about things like mobiles and laptops and tablets. People watching on these channels are still very much in that CTV environment. They are enjoying their content in the same way with a huge amount of focus on it. And it is the same environment as far as the user is concerned. As marketers, we sometimes think, oh no, somebody watching Netflix on their phone isn't the same as on their TV. But to the user, they don't know the difference and they consider it watching TV regardless. So in your campaigns, make sure you are enabling OTT and getting all of the users, whether they're on mobile, laptop or tablet, as well as watching from their TV or a games console.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And talking about measurement, so going back to measurement, how do you measure the impact of CTV advertising on offline metrics?
Yeah, so I can take that one. Yeah, I mean, I think we've touched on quite a few of them. But yeah, it really, again, massively depends on the advertiser. And I would really urge you to speak to your StackAdapt representative to really go into this in detail, specific to your client. But we can look at, as I said, brand lift studies are going to be a really great way to measure that impact. Again, depending on what it is that you want to understand. Is it, I want to drive more consideration of my brand? Do I want to drive more awareness? Footfall is another really great way to measure and understand the impact on your offline metrics. So we work mainly with AdSquare, to be able to map out, for example, your brick and mortar stores, to understand a user who was exposed to a CTV ad, or of course any other ads, and we can understand that by channel as well. Did they then come back and visit your store, for instance? That's a really great way of be able to understand the impact. But then again, and this is where it's really important to speak to your rep and also have a really open conversation with your clients as well. But it's really going to depend on the client that you're working with, and they might have things in place like mixed media modeling and things like that. So obviously those are when it starts to get outside of what StackAdapt can see and kind of report on, because these are going to be your clients, their own data. But how can we get them to think about that really early on so that they can start to share that information back with you guys as an agency and back with us? So again, we can feed that always back into those planning stages and always make sure that we're considering that as the planning cycles continue.
So optimizing the planning. And talking about trends in your experience, what is the average weekly reach? That's a question about weekly reach and being delivered against adults in the UK for connected TV. So what would you say an average weekly reach would be for connected TV in the UK?
So the actual number obviously varies week by week, and it's not something I have to hand, but it's still something I think that is worth us discussing. So as I said earlier on, 68% of adults in the UK are now using CTV on a frequent basis. So the actual reach is very, very strong. And we're connected to many different environments to be grabbing those users. But I kind of want to touch a bit more on the second part of that question, if that's okay, which was what, with the average incremental reach on top of medium weight linear and a BVOD campaign. So why I want to touch on that is using CTV and the various clever bits of data we've spoken about, you can actually target audience groups of people that have been watching medium weight or heavy weight of linear TV or of BVOD, and you can have a group that excludes those users. So all of your campaign on a platform like StackAdapt is running against those users that you couldn't reach otherwise. And I think that's really interesting because it means that your budgets are going to completely different audience. And hopefully that helps answer that question a bit. The actual numbers themselves vary a bit too much to say from now, but you can enforce that you are only serving to incremental reach.
Thank you.
Just to add to that as well is like the nature of doing it programmatically is that you're probably never going to want to target all adults. So the really cool thing as well is, and that's why we say we encourage you to speak to your reps, but also use the planning tool within the platform, because I imagine no one on this call is going to want to target all adults. So who is that demographic or kind of pocket of users who you want to focus on? We can actually go into the platform and kind of look at it, or even make more specific requests again through your rep. We can go away and give you an answer for a specific pool of users that you want to target. So we can actually tell you, not just for UK adults, which it's nice to have, but it's probably more useful for you to have, within people who are interested in kind of your category.
Mm-hmm.
We can give you a population of that as well, and kind of assume an incrementality from there as well. So that's it's really cool to be able to see that in platform through the planning tools as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Yasmin. And what's the minimum budget recommendation for running a CTV campaign, and how does it vary by market size?
Yep. So I think, once again, it's quite an open-ended question. It depends on how niche you want to get with your targeting. Generally speaking, I'd probably say you want to be running at least 10,000 a month in any major European market to start to see any benefits from that. If you can do a bit less if you're being quite niche with the geo and audience, but it is, at the end of the day, as Yaz keeps saying, a broadcast medium. You want to do it to really get into people's heads, to be shouting your brand message. So the more budget you can spend, the better. But about 10K is probably a good start before you start actually seeing results. But would you agree on that, Yaz?
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, it's going to depend on your audience size, but also how competitive is the time of year, how competitive is the audience, and sorry to be annoying and say, oh, it depends, and speak to your rep, but this is why you get that support as well, is we can work with you and kind of be sensible on, well, this is the total audience size. So if you're not going to, based on that population, if you're not maybe going to invest significantly enough, then we'd help you to figure out how can we narrow that down, how can we maybe point you in the direction of the right mix and things like that. So definitely 10K a month is what we say is a sensible starting point, but you always have that flexibility and kind of we want to make sure that it's going to be the right thing for that advertiser, for that audience, for that time of year. So definitely make sure that you speak to us to make sure that we can help guide you in the best possible direction.
Yep. And then just to quickly add a little bit more context onto that, just to give you an idea of the scales that you can achieve with CTV. We've got certain partners that have minimums that are way above 10K for just their platform. So if you add in various different platforms, overall you can very, very comfortably spend 50K upwards without it being a problem whatsoever, and get great performance off that.
Mm-hmm. And just talking about, I have one more question actually coming in, if that's okay. Any other consideration, any unique compliance or privacy consideration we should be aware of when running CTV campaigns?
Yep. So CTV in the EMEA market is a bit different to, say, the North American market in that regard. Obviously, we have to adhere to GDPR, and gaining consent from the user isn't always the easiest in the CTV space. This has come in leaps and bounds in the last year or so alone. But historically, people weren't gaining consent in the same way you gain consent on websites. And what this means in reality is there are various publishers that you need to overlay the targeting on the deal end, so the PMP side of things. The partner will overlay, or the publisher will overlay the data that you've requested, so that we know we're still buying the right audience, but they've got consent where, your DSP like StackAdapt might not have that same level of consent to target the exact user. And this is also why we mentioned earlier, not all partners allow retargeting. Most do, but not all do. And that's, again, a GDPR restriction. Generally, it's fine for the most part, but just be a bit conscious of you've still got to gather that consent from the user to do any targeting or retargeting.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nico, and thank you, Yasmin. That sort of wraps up our session today. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did and got some useful takeaways. Stay tuned for a follow-up email. We'll be sending the recording tomorrow, and do feel free to reach out to us if you have any further questions. We'll respond to any question we weren't able to answer today. So thank you again, and have a great day. Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining, everyone.